The Statue of Liberty is America's most famous symbol of freedom. But beneath its copper feet lies a buried history, and the official records are missing 14 pages. July 17th, 1885. New York Harbor. The French ship Isère had arrived weeks earlier, its hull packed with 214 crates, carrying the disassembled body of a giant. Copper plates, iron ribs, a woman built to stand 300 feet above the water, waiting only for her pedestal to rise on Bedloe's Island. Patrick O'Connell didn't care about symbolism. He was 29 years old, an Irish dock worker with rope-burned hands and a back that ached before noon. He cared about his wages, about the ship home to his sister in Cork, about getting through the day without a copper plate crushing his foot. That morning, the air over the island was thick and wet. Gulls screamed low over the water. Somewhere beneath his boots, the old stonework of Fort Wood groaned under the weight of new construction. The star-shaped fortress walls that would soon cradle Lady Liberty's pedestal, repurposed from a war that had ended 70 years before. Patrick was working a crew hauling granite blocks near the southern wall, where the old fort's foundation met bedrock. The blocks were massive, 18 tons apiece, and the ropes strained with every pull. It was routine work. Brutal, but routine. Then the ground betrayed him. A support beam cracked. A section of old stone facing, weakened by decades of harbour damp, gave way beneath his heel. Patrick fell, not far, only a few feet, but when he hit bottom and the dust cleared, he wasn't standing on fort foundation anymore. He was standing in a tunnel. The air down there was different. Colder. Older. It carried a smell he couldn't place at first. Dry stone, mineral dust, something faintly metallic, like old coins left too long in a drawer. Above him, faint and distant, he could still hear the harbour. The slap of water against pilings, a foghorn, the murmur of men working topside. But down here, that sound seemed to come from another world entirely. He struck a match. The light caught on walls that didn't match anything in Fort Wood's construction plans. The stonework was older, cruder in some places, unnervingly precise in others. The tunnel stretched ahead of him, 11 feet wide, tall enough to stand in, curving gently downward into the dark. Patrick O'Connell stood frozen at the threshold, match burning down toward his fingers, and made a decision that would quietly erase him from history. He stepped forward. What happened next has never made it into any official record of the Statue of Liberty's construction. You won't find it in the guidebooks, the plaques, or the ranger talks on Liberty Island today. But in the fading corners of New York harbor lore, in dockworkers' tales passed down through generations, in half-burned ledgers rumoured to sit in a warehouse basement in Red Hook, the story of that July morning still surfaces. Quietly. Persistently. Like something that refuses to stay buried. This is that story, according to the legend. Subscribe now, because videos like this rarely survive the algorithm for long. The more attention they receive, the faster they disappear. If you're seeing this today, you're among the few. Now, back into the dark with Patrick. The tunnel didn't behave like a tunnel should. It sloped downward at a steady, deliberate grade, as if built by someone who knew exactly where they wanted it to end. Patrick followed it by matchlight, one hand trailing the wall, counting his steps out of some instinct he didn't examine too closely. According to the story passed down through dockworker circles for generations, Patrick wasn't alone down there for long. A second worker, an Italian stonemason referred to in later whispers only as Renzo, supposedly followed the sound of Patrick's shouts and found him nearly 90 feet below the construction site, standing at the mouth of a chamber neither man could explain. The legend holds that the chamber sat exactly 96 feet beneath where the pedestal's cornerstone would later be laid. 96 feet of solid Manhattan schist and reclaimed fort stone between that chamber and the open sky. What supposedly filled that chamber is where the story gets its teeth. Local tales describe carved support pillars, unlike anything in standard 19th century engineering. Thick, load-bearing columns cut from stone that didn't match the surrounding bedrock. Shelving cut directly into the walls as if built for storage, long since emptied. And at the far end, according to the whispered accounts, a sealed archway, mortared shut with a mixture unlike any construction material used on the surface project above. Word of the discovery, so the story goes, reached the construction foreman within hours. And within a day, the US Army engineers overseeing the pedestal project, the same office responsible for coordinating with Fort Wood's military history, arrived on site. This is where the paper trail, if you can call it that, gets strange. Construction archives connected to the pedestal project are known to include a 214-page engineering report, filed in the fall of 1885, cataloguing load calculations, stone deliveries, and structural assessments for the foundation work. Historians who've combed through surviving fragments of that report, or at least, so the legend claims, note something odd. 14 construction logs referenced in the report's index simply do not exist in the archive. Not damaged, not misfiled. Absent, as though they were never meant to be found again. Shipping manifests for the Isère are real, publicly documented and thoroughly catalogued. The ship's cargo of copper sheeting and iron framework is a matter of historical record. But local legend insists that a separate, unofficial manifest circulated briefly among harbour officials that summer, referencing additional materials, Bedloe's Island, restricted access, never itemised, never explained, and never seen again after October of that year. Old photographs, said to have circulated in a now-lost collection held by a Brooklyn harbour photographer, allegedly showed a temporary wooden structure erected over the exact spot where Patrick fell through, a structure that does not appear in any of the officially preserved construction photography of the pedestal site. If it existed, it was gone within a month. None of this is verified in the way a historian would want it verified. That's the nature of legend, but the details are specific enough, consistent enough across the versions passed down, that they've never quite died out. To understand why this story took root the way it did, you have to understand the ground it grew from. Bedloe's Island wasn't empty space before Lady Liberty arrived. It had a history stretching back centuries, a history the statue's builders inherited, layer by layer, whether they wanted to or not. Fort Wood, the star-shaped structure whose walls still form the base of the statue's pedestal today, was built in the early 1800s as part of New York Harbor's coastal defense system. It's real. It's documented. You can see its distinctive 11-point star shape in the pedestal's foundation to this day, if you look at it from above. But forts like Fort Wood were rarely built on untouched ground. Harbour islands throughout the northeast carried layers of use. Colonial fortifications, quarantine stations, burial grounds, and in some documented cases, forgotten storage tunnels connected to earlier military installations. It wasn't unusual, in that era, for construction crews to break through into spaces nobody currently working the site had any record of. So when the legend describes Patrick falling through into something centuries older than the statue itself, it's worth asking. Older compared to what? Fort Wood itself was only a few decades old by 1885, but the ground beneath it carried the memory of everything that came before. Is it possible that what Patrick found wasn't some grand hidden purpose, but simply a forgotten storage chamber connected to earlier military use of the island? Its significance inflated over generations of retelling. That's certainly the more grounded explanation. Local legend, of course, prefers the version with more mystery in it, and the location's reputation for buried secrets didn't end in 1885. Fast forward to July 30th, 1916. Black Tom Island, a small landmass connected to the New Jersey shoreline, just off the harbour, less than a mile from Bedloe's Island, erupted in one of the largest explosions in American history. German agents, in an act of sabotage during the First World War, detonated roughly 2 million pounds of ammunition and explosives, being staged there for shipment to the Allies. The blast was so massive it shattered windows in Times Square, damaged the Brooklyn Bridge, and, this part is very real, very documented, sent shrapnel tearing into the Statue of Liberty herself. Damage from that explosion is the reason the statue's torch has been closed to public access ever since. Over a century later, visitors still can't climb into the torch, and the official reason traces directly back to that night. Local legend has never let that detail go unnoticed. The same island, the same harbour, a closure that's lasted more than 100 years, officially attributed to structural damage from 1916. But whispered about, in certain circles, as something that gave the army a permanent, unquestionable justification for keeping certain areas of the statue's infrastructure closed indefinitely. Is that a coincidence? Almost certainly, according to any conventional historical reading. But ask yourself, how convenient is it that the one part of the monument closed off from public access for over a century happens to sit almost directly above the same ground, where, 3 decades earlier, an Irish dockworker allegedly broke through into something nobody could explain? The restricted underground maintenance tunnels beneath Liberty Island are real. The National Park Service maintains service infrastructure below the visitor areas. Utility access, drainage systems, and structural maintenance corridors that have never been open to the public and are rarely photographed. Official explanations are mundane. Plumbing, electrical conduit, structural inspection access. But mundane explanations have never stopped a good legend from asking, what else is down there? According to the story, the Army's response to Patrick's discovery was immediate, and it was absolute. Within 72 hours, engineers had the chamber and its connecting tunnel sealed with poured concrete. A material choice that, notably, wasn't standard for military fortification work of that era, which typically relied on masonry and mortar. The speed and the material both stand out, at least in the way the legend tells it, as signs that whoever ordered the sealing wanted permanence, not just containment. Every worker who had entered the tunnel, according to the tale, was pulled from the construction crew and required to sign a document, described in later retellings as a secrecy agreement, though no verified copy has ever surfaced. Workers were reportedly told the chamber posed a structural risk to the pedestal foundation and that discussing it publicly would jeopardize the entire monument project, a threat with real teeth for immigrant laborers who depended on the work. Renzo, the stonemason who allegedly reached the chamber alongside Patrick, disappears from the story almost entirely after this point. Some versions say he left the crew voluntarily and returned to Italy within the year. Others say nothing about him at all, which is its own kind of unsettling in a story built entirely from things left unsaid. And Patrick O'Connell himself, the man at the centre of it, simply fades from the payroll records. Dock worker rosters for the Pedestal construction project, to the extent they survive in fragmented form, show O'Connell listed through early August of 1885. After that, nothing. No termination notice, no wage dispute, no record of his ship home to Cork. He appears and then he doesn't. Local legend claims Patrick kept a diary throughout the summer of 1885. The kind of thing a homesick immigrant labourer might well have kept. A habit that would have been entirely ordinary if the content hadn't allegedly included detailed sketches of the tunnel and chamber. That diary, according to the story, was confiscated during the same period the secrecy agreements were circulated. It has never surfaced. Neither, according to the tale, have several photographs that were said to document the excavation, pulled, allegedly, from a government archive sometime in the following decades, their absence noted only by a handful of researchers who went looking for them and came up empty. Whether any of that confiscation actually happened is, of course, unverifiable. Government archives lose material through mundane channels all the time. Poor record keeping, water damage, simple neglect. That's the boring, likely explanation. But boring explanations rarely satisfy a legend that's had over a century to grow teeth. What's harder to dismiss is this. When the pedestal's foundation was reinforced during preservation work in the 20th century, and again during structural assessments tied to the statue's centennial restoration in the 1980s, engineering surveys of the southern foundation area are said, in local law, to have been unusually brief. Renovation plans from both eras reportedly routed new structural work around the specific section of Fort Wood's southern wall where Patrick's fall allegedly occurred. Not through it, not near it, but carefully, deliberately around it. Coincidence or caution born from institutional memory that never made it into any public document? The legend doesn't answer that question, it just keeps asking it. Over time, the story slipped out of the official narrative entirely, surviving only in fragments. A line in a dockworker's oral history, collected decades later. A footnote in an amateur harbour historian's self-published pamphlet. A story told by longshoremen on break, half joking, half serious. The way the best local legends always are. Passed down not because anyone can prove it, but because nobody can quite disprove it either. And Patrick O'Connell, the man who broke through the wall, who stood at the edge of something 96 feet beneath the ground and chose to step forward into it, became little more than a name in the margins. A dock worker who existed and then didn't. No grave that anyone's identified. No final letter home. Just a gap in a payroll ledger and a story that outlived every official record meant to contain it. Perhaps nothing was ever hidden beneath the Statue of Liberty. Or perhaps the greatest secret was never inside the monument, but beneath it. History records what survives. It rarely records what was deliberately buried. If even one forgotten worker told the truth, how many other discoveries have disappeared beneath official history? If this story moved something in you, share it with one person, just one. The most enduring stories are the ones we keep alive, and the only way those tales survive is if enough of us refuse to stop telling them. Until next time, keep looking at the shadows